The thing we can't talk about with the Retroid Pocket 5 is that with this beautiful AMOLED screen, the button layout, the front-facing speakers, the fairly good ergonomics, and that glorious Snapdragon 865 chip, make this a lovely device for emulating a system that we're not allowed to talk about. So let's instead talk about this lovely screen. It has glorious, rich colors. I haven't spent any time on shaders or overlays because to me, everything just looks so good on this beautiful screen. I actually think the ergonomics were better on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, and that's because it was higher in this way. And so with this device, you end up holding it with the ends of your fingers. They're just something to grip onto. And you hold the device like this with your fingers. So you end up holding it with your fingers out and then having to use your little fingers to rest it so that you can move your fingers up and down, which is not ideal. You've got the buttons here and the joystick here. On the Retroid Pocket Mini, the joystick is slightly more inset, which makes it a little bit easier when you think about it logically. When you pivot your fingers, you're going to move in a direction where you want the joystick to be more sort of there on the device. And so that vertical cluster is not ideal, especially on such a small cluster where the joystick is so close to the buttons. On the ergonomics, the pocketability, we dress quite smart today. It is pocketable actually. You know, these pants aren't super loose. You know, you've got a bulge, but it's not bad. I'd say because it's so smooth, you end up being able to slip it into your pocket quite nicely. I think the design is pretty much the best in the business right now. I know a lot of people were upset or just annoyed that they were moving away from that nice retro feel that we were getting with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro and the Retroid Pocket 3 and all those. It is a departure from that, and this is not that. This is a different design. It's a different look. It's a different feel, and I really like it. It's beautiful. It's more professional looking, more serious looking, and it is probably one of the best designs in this price bracket on the market right now. The quality seems pretty good, pretty well put together. It's a pretty solid device. Obviously, you've got that glass panel, and if you drop this, it's game over. But other than that, I've put the screen guard on, which you can see the screen guard didn't go on properly. But yeah, it is what it is. The buttons and sticks are excellent. Now, we kind of have the same buttons that we've had since the Retroid Pocket Flip, the same double injection molded action buttons, the same joysticks that they've been using since the Retroid Pocket 2S. We've got the same dome switch D-pad. These triggers have got a very nice medium firmness to them. I really enjoy them. I've been using this for streaming. Not ideal ergonomics for streaming, but I have been using it for streaming. And these triggers are great. Linear analog triggers, and they work really well. All the function buttons have got a sort of soft digital click to them. Very nice to use. Unlike the Anbernic, where these joysticks are protruding and you get like the full range of motion of the sticks, they are recessed. So you lose a little bit of that range of motion, but what you gain is just like I showed in crotch time, a more pocketable device. The Anbernic RG406H, I said it's the best device they've made so far, doesn't have front-facing speakers. This has front-facing speakers. It wins. In terms of power, we can do Switch, we can do WiiU. 3DS is glitchy. I think it's a difficult system to emulate, but it plays it and it's got that brute force just to power through and play those games, even if it's stuttering. We've got PS2, obviously, that's going to play really well now because of the 865 chipsets. GameCube plays really well, and we've got enough headroom to play high-end Android games. Not that Android gaming has gone very far, but you know, Call of Duty, and I like to play Dead Cells. All those games are going to play really well on here. Let's talk about streaming, because this device, like I spoke about the Retroid Pocket Mini being a good streaming device with some serious caveats. Now, this, even though the ergonomics aren't great, it's very practical. I don't like having a big device, even in my house. So even though I love this new Ioneer that they sent me, it's not practical for my everyday life. Even though the ergonomics aren't wonderful, the controls are really nice, really smooth, analog triggers, and so you get to do some decent streaming on here with a great screen. So I've got my goggles here, and this is what I use with the Retroid Pocket Mini. What's nice is here we've got a little bit more in the way of options for sending it to an outboard screen like XR glasses. So here it says turn off the handheld console screen, Only do that if you're enabled mouse mode, obviously, or there's a mouse shortcut with the buttons here. And then please select the sound output when connected to DP. When turned on, the sound is output along with DP, otherwise the local speaker output. Okay, so if we switch this off, we're going to get sound from the handheld. If we switch it on, we're going to get sound here. So that's nice. So we've got features, and that's thanks to Android 13. Their virtual mouse, so we can enable the virtual mouse, we can add a shortcut, like shortcut key, so then you can switch this screen off and have a virtual mouse. So we have options here in terms of using an external monitor or using XR glasses. So this is a little bit better than the Retroid Pocket Mini. Also, in my eyes, is a 16:9 screen matching the screen in these glasses. The benefit of the Retroid Pocket Mini is it's a strange little thing, but I found that the rumble motor is a bit better in the Retroid Pocket Mini. It has probably has something to do with the way that they've positioned it in the device. So this rumble motor feels like a cheaper handheld, whereas the Retroid Pocket Mini feels more like an Xbox controller. As soon as they can fix the external display output on the Mini, it really is going to be the ultimate tiny little streaming device. Anyway, so streaming to this, I use this beautiful AMOLED screen. That's the other reason why I like streaming to this. My games just look wonderful. Let me just explain to you a little bit about streaming if you're not into streaming games to your device. One of the things that I had to do was make sure that I have a 5 gigahertz network in my home. My previous router only had a normal 2.4 gigahertz network, and that is too slow to stream to your device to get the speeds you need to play seamlessly. And so what I needed to do was make sure that my laptop was plugged in via Ethernet cable to the router, and then I just make sure that this thing is connected via the 5 gigahertz network. So if you set up your router in your home and it ended up with 2 Wi-Fi signals and you've never known why, the one is a 5 gigahertz signal and it's specifically for gamers. Let's look at a few little setup quirks with the Retroid Pocket 5 that I've discovered as I've been using it. Just look at this beauty. Ooh, my FPV drone. Haha. Built by me. I also have a channel about this if you want to go check it out. Before I get onto the Retroid Pocket 5, I want to quickly just mention something. I've been going on and on about how the Odin 2 Mini is the device, it's the best device, it's the nicest device, and I still believe that. This is my favorite device, but I've stopped talking about it. Someone commented on my recent video because I talked about how I'm continually picking up the Retroid Pocket Mini, and the reason is because I stopped playing on this device, and the reason for that is because it was sapping all my creativity and all the sort of airtime for any other device on the channel. I've put this one aside. It still is my favorite device. Even picking it up now, it reminds me of how well it's made. And I did want to just pop it onto the screen because this still, to me, is the main contender against the Retroid Pocket 5. It is more powerful and it is better made in my opinion, and people talk about the thermals not being fantastic, and you know, I've never had it get so hot that it's unpleasant, but it does get fairly warm. Very nice triggers, and it's obviously got that PS Vita look, which I absolutely love. But what I'm going to do in this section of the video is, because honestly, I think it's my ADHD that stops me from doing a full setup guide. I just can't bring my brain to do the setup guide that I did for the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. That video took me like 2 weeks. It sapped my headspace in such a powerful way. And so I think what I'm going to do is every now and again, I'm going to be releasing tips and tricks on setting up the device. So today is tips and tricks on how to set up the Retroid Pocket 5, but also tips and tricks on how to set up an Android device now in 2025. Things change quite quickly as well. And so I think just giving you some of the pitfalls that I've experienced recently, some of the things that I'm doing, some of the new technology I've discovered, that's what this video is going to be about. So the first thing I want to mention, I will put the link in the description below, or I might do some show notes on my website, but there is a link giving you emulators and performance of different emulators and settings for a lot of games. I haven't seen a spreadsheet like that in a while, and so it's very handy. I'll put the creator of the spreadsheet on the screen now, but go check that out. That will help you and direct you. Let's say, for instance, you want to play a specific game. You go to that spreadsheet, you find the emulator that they recommend, you find the settings they recommend, and that's how you will learn how to do this. Go game by game. The thing that I don't like about my Retroid Pocket my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro setup guide is that it's very comprehensive and very overwhelming. The thing that I comment mostly on that video is take it one thing at a time. If you like older systems, set up Retroarch and start with Retroarch and move from there. Anyway, what I want to do now is take you through all the steps that will get you going, and there will be a lot more work than I'm talking about in this video to get a lot of these things going, but I'm going to show you step by step the main things that you need to know. So all of these things, you need a ROM folder, and it's one of the reasons I like Android so much is I've just created the nomenclature that I've used, the ROM small s, is actually for ESDE, Emulation Station, which I'm not using. I was planning to use it and I just decided I still like Daijisho. It still is my favorite front end. Tapioca Fox, if you are watching this, there is a fan out there supporting you. If you're deciding to stop development, I would love it if you didn't. And then there, you can just name these folders as you please and just put your ROMs in there. For 3DS, I use the 3DS ROM folder as my system folder. The first thing I want to talk about is Obtanium. I think the first person I saw use this was Zoo from Retro Handhelds. Now, Obtanium, just Google Obtanium and download this from their GitHub page. Obtanium is a program installer. It's like an app store, but for apps that come from GitHub and other places. If you look up apps.obtanium.imranr.dev and you go there and you search for the apps that you're looking for. So for instance, the next thing I'm going to talk about is Retroarch. You go to the 64-bit build for Retroarch and add to Obtanium, and that will automatically add it to Obtanium. But now, what if an app, for instance, a Daijisho, which is my favorite front end, there are some glitches with Daijisho, but it's my personal favorite. Another one that a lot of people are using is ES-DE, Emulation Station. I still like Daijisho, but it's no longer on the Obtanium app. So what you do is you go to Daijisho. Let's find the app. If it is on GitHub, this is going to work for you. So let's say you found an app that you really want to use, but it's not available on the App Store. It's only available on a GitHub page. This will not only allow you to download it easily, but also allow you to keep it up to date. So there, my GitHub page is already there. But if you Google Daijisho, I don't want the one from the App Store. I want the one from the GitHub page because that's going to give me all his latest updates. There were rumors that it had stopped being developed, but I saw there was an update in December. So go to releases. Now, once you're at the releases page, this is the link that you copy. So you copy that link, and now you go to Obtanium. And when you're in Obtanium, you say add app, you paste that link, and you say add. Sometimes it takes a long time and it'll actually add that app. So there you'll see I've got Daijisho there, and you'll see I've got an update for Retroarch ready for me when I want to. CEMU for Android as well is something that you can only get from GitHub, and so I've added it there, and that's how you do it. You do the Obtanium apps section where you can download apps, you can add apps directly from there, or just go to the GitHub, find the releases page, and add your apps here. And like I said, the benefit of this is that it keeps your apps up to date and allows you to download them easily in the beginning. So that's how I keep all my apps up to date and on the device. And then anything that I need from the App Store, I get it from there. I want to talk about Retroarch. So what's nice about these more powerful chipsets, this is the first time where I felt comfortable using Retroarch for almost everything. So I use it for everything up to PSP. So I don't have PPSSPP on here. I do have DuckStation for PS1 games, but I'm not using it. I use Retroarch for absolutely everything. So let me take you through a few of my little tips for Retroarch. So when you get into Retroarch, okay, I've changed the menu here. It will be different. I've changed the menu system on Retroarch. If this is confusing and you want to follow along with me, just go into user interface, settings, user interface, and you scroll down to menu and set your menu to XMB. And then you want to just go and quit. That should save your settings and you should be in the same menu system as me. So one of the first things I check with Retroarch is I go to settings and I check that saving is working correctly. What I do is I make sure that the that we've got auto save state is on, auto load state is on, increment save automatically, and I've just set it to 25. That means that it's going to incrementally save up to the number 25 and then start from the bottom again. You can increase that number if you want. And auto load state means that wherever you left off, it's going to start that game again. Auto save states, it will save whenever you shut down a game. So that I like to have that on. Now, be sure to quit your game. Once you've done all these things, don't just exit Retroarch, don't do this and exit Retroarch. Make sure you go to quit Retroarch properly, and that will change any changes that you've made. Another thing I always do when I go in here, if you haven't already, create a Retro Achievements account and switch Retro Achievements on. Enter your username and password, retroachievements.org, go create a username and password, and then make sure hardcore mode is off because that will affect your save state, so make sure that is off. And then the other thing I do is I set my buttons, I map my control. So usually it'll pick up that you're using the Retroid Pocket controller. This left analog should be on, which means that any games that don't have an analog stick, it'll use the analog stick as a D-pad. And then you just go through and map your buttons. So D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right, so on and so forth. What you do need to make sure when you're mapping this, make sure that the controller setup, so if you want it A to be A and B to be B, like a retro system, then set this in the drop-down menu. But if you want in the main menu of the device, when you like navigating Daijisho, your front end or whatever, and you actually want it to be more like an Xbox, you want B to be A and you want A to be B, then set this to Xbox. But I want the whole system to be correct, so I've left it at that. Now hotkeys, you can decide on a hotkey enable, what you want to use as your hotkey. What I've done is I've made L3, so you press down in here, that enables your hotkey, which means, so you go here, that's my hotkey, so which means any of these hotkeys that I'm going to show you now, you start by pressing this down and then it will turn your other buttons into hotkeys. So what I've done is menu toggle, I've made start and select. So if I press that, it's going to open the menu. But another feature that I've seen is now available is just menu toggle. So if I do this, I make my back button menu. So that's very nice because anywhere in the system, if you press the back button, it's going to open Retroarch as the main menu. Quit controller combo. So this is to quit a game. Press L3 and R3. And then you can set any of these as hotkeys, but the only thing I really use is load state. So I've set my L1 as this bumper, this left bumper. I've set that as my load save state. And then save state, I've set that as R1. So now I know if I press L3 and L1, it is going to load my state. If I press L3 and R1, it's going to save the game. So that's pretty much my hotkeys. I make sure that I've got the back button as a menu button. I make sure that I've got the hotkeys enabled for save states, and that's pretty much it. I don't really use the toggles these buttons to shut down. I usually just go into the menu and press quit. But that's that. Now menu controls, if you find that when you're navigating Retroarch, your A is B and your B is A, then you will go into menu controls here and you will menu swap OK and cancel buttons. And that will swap these two buttons so that it's unified within your system. So that A is A and B is B, basically. Sorry about the camera shift, it's the next day. So the next thing that you want to do is online updater. So this is a very basic Retroarch setup. What I've found over the years is that Retroarch themselves have done a lot of adjustments to Retroarch according to what the community have been doing. So a lot of the things that I used to do are now just presets onto Retroarch. So a lot of the things that I used to show are now just, ready to roll when you download it. Okay, so the online updater, you need the core downloader. So you need to make sure that your device is connected to the internet. And what I recommend here is you can download all the cores that you are going to be using, but you can pretty much just go crazy. Thank you very much. We have cappuccino today by my son. No, that's it. Thank you, sir. And then you can see I've gone through and done, like, I don't even have arcade games on here at the moment, but I've downloaded the arcade. It shows a little hashtag to the ones that you've downloaded. I'm a Atari 7800 fan, so I've downloaded that. And if you're unsure, if you're a beginner, I'd say just download whatever looks like you might need it. The main ones are very obvious, so we'll go down here. There's your PC Engine, so you can download your PC Engine emulators. I've been trying just to use the Citra. It does work, but I'm still going to be using a standalone emulator for 3DS. DS, definitely worth looking into just using Retroarch for DS on a device with this kind of power. And here we go, Nintendo. All the Nintendo goodies that I've just downloaded. NES, N64. I think N64, you might be better off using a standalone emulator. I haven't been testing the N64 lately, but you could play around with that. SNES, all of the things. Then Sega, all of the Sega emulators. You can probably just try using emulators on Retroarch for Sega Saturn. Otherwise, you can download Yabu-san Shiro independent emulator. PlayStation. Now, historically, I always used to use DuckStation for my PS1 emulation. It was ease of use, just comfort. I'm used to DuckStation, but I've just recently shifted over because of the power and the ease of use of using Retroarch for everything. I've switched over to Retroarch for PlayStation 1 and PSP. So that's a big shift now. I've always kind of said, get PP, SSPP Gold, support their devs, all that sort of thing. But now it's built into Retroarch. I hope Retroarch are supporting the devs in some way. But yeah, because of the power packed into this thing, we can just use Retroarch for PP, SSPP. Okay, so two more things. You can switch this off completely if you aren't using, those little borders that people use to make the games look pretty and that. If you aren't using those, you can just switch this off, quit Retroarch, and it will save it correctly. If you are using the borders, what I usually do is I enable hide overlay when controller is connected. So I'll show you what that means now. Then the other thing is the Retroid Pocket Mini apparently has got a problem with shaders. I tested this specific shader out on the Retroid Pocket Mini, and it's the shader I use for everything. I like it, it looks nice, it makes me happy, and so I'm just going to show you my shader and how I set it up. I think I need to open a game. So let's quit Retroarch, and let's go open a game. I'm going to open a random game that I never play, and you'll see there is the overlay. There you'll see my retro achievements popping up. And there we go. Now you'll see my shader is already enabled here, so I'm going to show you how I did that. So if I wasn't clear there, when I moved the sticks, that on-screen overlay of the on-screen buttons is turned off. If you don't want that, you can just completely disable it in Retroarch settings. Now I want to show you a shader that I use for everything, and it works on the Retroid Pocket Mini. When you're in your game, you press your menu button. Remember, we mapped the back button to be a menu button. It's immediately in the quick menu. Now you go down to shaders and switch video shaders on, and you want to load a preset. So we're going to go into shaders GLSL, and we're going to go down to CRT. Now you can use this pretty much for everything. Like, I think I even use it. No, I don't use it for Game Boy Advance. I'm lying. But for any TV system, I use this shader. This is for TV systems. And you go down to CRT GOM, and now that preset is loaded. This preset creates a curvature to the screen. So let's just see if it's actually done that. Yeah, so it's created a curvature. I don't like that. Maybe you like that sort of like fake TV thing. I hate it. So we're going to go down here, and we're going, I like the little rounded edged corners. So that's one of the reasons I like this shader. So go down to shader parameters, and we go to curvature toggle. And we're going to toggle that curvature off, and we're going to save content directory preset. So any games in the folder of, the NES folder, it's going to apply this preset. So we say yes, go back to the game, and there you go. You've got the shader. And like I said, you can also disable these little corners, and it will actually work quite well for Game Boy Advance as well. Okay, let's just quit properly. So I've got my quit shortcut. We'll just go back in to make sure. And there we go. Just move my sticks to get rid of that. And there my shader is on. So if you want to mess around with shaders, I'll quickly show you just the folder layout for the shaders. If you go in here and you say load presets, GLSL is generally where I go. You want to do, let's say I keep mentioning Game Boy Advance, you want to do Game Boy Advance. You go to handheld, and then you go to, see, that's where you can do like console borders and stuff. But here we go through and there's a whole lot of ones for the handhelds. And so just look for one, a GBA one, and play around with the GBA ones. Play around with the LCD. Here we go, LCD grid. I think those are the ones I end up using for, oh no, that's Game Boy. Yeah, they're Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color. There's a bunch of them. So just go through here, play with them. Once you find one that you like, then you can go through my thing of going to save presets, save content directory presets, and that's how it goes. So I'd rather you learn how to use Retroarch, because once you master Retroarch, this whole experience becomes quite easy. And that's pretty much it. That is my Retroarch down and dirty setup. So let's go out of Retroarch, and remember what I said, go to quit and quit Retroarch, and it will save your configuration settings. Now, to quickly mention those emulators that I actually haven't been using is Yabusan Shiro 2 Pro. You install it, and all of these have a lot of like little quirks on how to set up the controllers and all that sort of thing. I'm not going to get into that in this section of the video, but just to say, my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro video, the setup guide, the mapping of the buttons is still very relevant today. So Yabusan Shiro Pro, you can go check it there on my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro setup guide. The other emulator that I would consider is the Mupen Plus 6 FZ emulator, and this will do your N64. So if you're having trouble using Retroarch for N64, get the standalone emulator. The nice thing about using Retroarch, and the reason why I'm kind of like switching over, is once you set your controllers, and like we mapped the controller in Retroarch, all of these systems will now be mapped. So using standalone emulators becomes a bit of a drag once you get used to that. But N64, you might run into issues. Get this one and you will map it. And again, my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro setup guide, the mapping of the buttons will still be relevant on that video. Okay, so we've showed you Obtanium for apps that you can't get from the App Store. I've shown you Retroarch. I've shown you a few of the apps that I am not currently using, but you might need, the emulators, standalone emulators that you might need. Now moving on to 3DS emulation. This is fairly interesting to me because I recently just discovered that someone started developing Mandarin, and the devs, the guy that did Lime 3DS and then one of the other devs from somewhere else, they've decided to join forces, and they're doing something called, oh crap, I forget the name. Alakazar. Put it on the screen. I completely forgot. The name space is out now. But I'm not using that yet because it's not ready yet. And apparently they're not going to support, I think, encrypted ROMs or decrypted ROMs, which is a little bit of a pain. So depending on how you encoded your ROMs, you might not be able to use that emulator. It's to stop piracy, but it is a little bit of an inconvenience. There still is an archive available on a GitHub link that I'll put in the description below. And these Mandarin guys. So this was interesting because according to them, they've done some performance quirks. And what's nice about using these standalone emulators is that maybe this dev was interested in a certain subset of games and this dev was interested in a different subset of games. And so you might find performance varies with different games on these emulators. So if you are the sort of person that's trying to squeeze out, excuse the pun, squeeze lemons and mandarins, if you're trying to squeeze out as much performance as possible, you might enjoy just having these two different emulators and switching between them. And I'll show you in a bit how to switch your emulators in Daijisho. And that's another reason why I enjoy just using Daijisho still, even though I feel like maybe it's no longer under development, but maybe I should just reach out to the dev and find out. So anyway, these are all still running on the same platform as Citra. The quirks with the 3DS emulators is you need to fiddle around with GPU drivers. And I was messing around with this recently, and I've downloaded the most recent turnip driver, and it actually wasn't working very well, specifically, and we'll talk about Switch a little bit later. But this new turnip driver wasn't working very well. The latest driver that I find works well with everything is the 9v2. So the turnip driver revision 9v2. That one works well seemingly with everything. And then if you go into settings, you can map your gamepad here. Circle pad, I would do my left stick. C stick, I would do my right stick. D-pad, obviously, so up-down axis, you just press up. Left-right axis, just press left. And then you would map the D-pad over here. L and R would be your L and R bumpers. ZL, ZR will be your left and right triggers. A swap screen, I will do the left L3. So L3, I'll do swap screen. R3, I will do cycle layout. So what that is, you know, 3DS has got two screens. Swap screen will switch the screens. So if you set it to full screen, the swap screen, oh no, I've lost track of which one is the swap screen, but the swap screen will switch it between the two screens, which is what I mostly do. Although with this long 16:9 screen, you could very easily just do the main screen here and then a smaller screen here. That's my other alternative that I do. Graphics, generally I just choose Vulkan, but if you go to any sort of spreadsheet gameplay setup guide, there are some that do work better with OpenGLES. And then your back button should just be your menu button. Opening a game, that is where you will disable the overlay. You'll see like a button overlay here. You disable it. Okay, and I think that is 3DS. Let's move on. So CEMU for Android is a fork of the normal CEMU, which is I think for Windows and other platforms. Now, CEMU is quite fun. You will be taken through a setup guide when you first open it. Create a game path. Wherever you keep your ROMs, just direct it to there. Again, you will need to map your controller. Pretty self-explanatory here. A, B, X, Y, L and R are the bumpers. ZL, ZR are the triggers. Plus and minus will be like a switch plus and minus over there. D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right. Self-explanatory. Left axis, that'll be your stick axis. So click will be your L3 action. Then up, down, left, right. Same with the right stick. There's a few options here you can fiddle around with, but I haven't really messed with that. You will go to graphics packs. Now this will give you the option to fix certain things. Now I can't remember which game it was, but I had a game running on here and it wasn't working, and I went into the graphics packs and it had mods. So here we've got a 60 FPS mod. Let's actually turn that off. That's gonna like mod it to do 60 FPS, and it actually might be hampering gameplay or performance. So there we go. Oh, this was it. So this random unknown game, the title screen crash fix. So you can't get past the title screen. This fixes that. So these little graphic packs are excellent. I can't get Rise of Lyric to play properly, but if you mess around with this, maybe you will. It also has to do with the device. CEMU is fun to play around with. I never owned a Wii U. I always wanted a Wii U. And so it's nice to mess around with this and play these independent games about Italian plumbers. Then we've installed Dolphin on Obtanium. Now the Dolphin emulator is also very similar to Citra and those emulators. You'll show it your GameCube folder. You'll show it your Wii folder. Then we go into settings. Again, I've chosen Vulkan, but you can mess around with that. And then when we go into settings, we've got inputs. Now, someone actually asked me about this, and I don't know if in my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro setup guide, I didn't do this properly or what, but I'm just gonna reiterate this now. So GameCube input settings, not super complicated. So A, B, X, Y, just normal. Z, I just make it L3. You can call up a GameCube controller on Google and see what all these buttons are, and then you can choose a button that feels more natural to you. Start, obviously starts. Control stick. So here I do the left stick, up, down, left, right. If you see a whole bunch of numbers, that means that it has picked up on a complex input, so like a diagonal input or whatever. So then just clear it and do it again until you just get axis, naught, minus, or whatever, a simple number. That means you've got that direct single input of left, right, up, down. C stick, I do the right stick there. Again, you see there, that is the incorrect input. So we're going to quickly do this and then do right. There we go. That is what we want. So there, I missed that one. So that's a good example. L, R, just your L and R bumpers. R, analog, right trigger. left analog, left trigger, D-pad, up, down, left, right. The thing that I just wanted to clarify was Wii input. So what I do here is I mostly just focus on games that would play by using the Wii controller horizontally. Any games that don't do that, I kind of just leave it. It's too much effort. But you can go in here and emulate movements. So you'd have to be very game specific. So if the game used a lot of like up-down movement and it used one button. So let's say those are the two main inputs that you are concerned about. You would call up the controller on Google, find out what button it was using, map that button, and then map that up-down movement. You can create profiles. You want to create a profile for the game, you can create a profile here. So there's motion simulation, motion input. So you can really get into it. So extension, nunchuck, and then you can set that. But what I mostly do, just to make life easier for myself, Wii Remote buttons. So I do the Wii Remote buttons, and it's AB, so AB, normal. 1 and 2, I make X and Y. Then select and starts, plus and minus is select and starts. Home button, I made L3, and then D-pad up, down, left, right, like a normal D-pad. I think to answer that person's question on YouTube, the comment is some games are just not going to be very easy to map for emulation. You'll have to be very scientific about it. You're going to have to get a little picture of the controller out. You're going to have to try and envision the motion that you're going to be doing that you would have done in the original game and then try emulate it that way. So it's going to take quite a lot of effort. And then also with Dolphin, this is interesting because I for a long time didn't even know that Dolphin had this as an option. I've included that driver that I mentioned, which hasn't actually been working very well. So Dolphin also does custom drivers. And so I'm just going to go to my downloads and find that turnip driver. This is the one, the 9v2. That's the one that's been working best for me. So I'm just going to put that on in here. And when I do decide to do some GameCube or Wii, it's ready for me. The other link that I will include in my show notes is how to set up NetherSX. Trixarian has kindly set up a whole setup guide on how to get your NetherSX going. There's a few hurdles to jump through. The UniPatch is the thing that makes it really easy. You need 2 little pieces of software. You put it in there and it spits out NetherSX on the other end. So believe it or not, Yuzu is actually still available online if you want to find it. I have not put the link to that in my show notes. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I've also got Suhu here, but anyway, the great thing about Yuzu is that it maps your controls automatically. Over here, we will put in that turnip driver, the 9v2. When you set it up, you will choose your ROM folder. That's the other place that you need to go to. And then install firmware. So you need to download the latest Switch firmware and then install prod keys. So you need to go find the prod.keys and then install them there. So those 2 things are critical to just get the thing going nicely. And then off you go and just try some games, see what works. Not everything works. Yuzu was stopped in development, so it only works to an extent. But there are lots of games that will work quite well, including some other games that we may not speak of. And now let's dive into Daijisho. So as I mentioned, through Obtanium, you download your Daijisho there, or you can just download the app from GitHub. But I'd rather just add the GitHub release page onto Obtanium so that it keeps it up to date for me. If Tapioca Fox decides to update it in the next month or 2, I've got that update. For some reason, I don't know why, but a bunch of Daijisho icons pop up. The one has got, I think the one is actually a debug. I think he's been having issues with the app. But anyway, just use the first one that appears. All right, so, there's quite a bit to go through with Daijisho. I'm just going to take you through what I do. You could really get into the weeds on this, and if you really want to see, not a lot has changed since I did my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro setup guide, so if you really want to get into the weeds, you can go look at that video. Just to say, the reason I like Daijisho is because everything is here. You can set this as your home screen and you still have access to all your apps. That's one of the main reasons I like it. The other reason are these widgets. So I can pin and play the games that I am currently playing. So for instance, Sonic Generations, one of the games I'm playing. Wouldn't be an Adin Walls video if I didn't do this. Okay, so let's start with settings. go into library and download platforms. So here is where you would download the platforms that you want to set up in your front end. I've installed Nintendo 3DS, Nintendo Wii U, PlayStation Portable, Sega Genesis. That's where you download the platforms, and that will appear here in your front end like that. So for instance, now I can't see some of the artwork. I can do scrape sync entirely and it'll just sync everything and check for artwork. Appearance, this is where you will download your wallpapers. There is a website where you can go and check all of these. Just Google Daijisho wallpaper packs and you'll be able to preview them as they would appear on your device. Here you can set dark theme, and then pure dark theme for OLED screens. This, you need to switch this on. Navigation, so here you would set your home page. When it opens up for the first time, it's going to open on this. So I set it to widgets because that's where all my favorites are, and as I use the device, I tweak those widgets as I please. So that's a great place to start. There's also a search hotkey you can set up. So you can set a key on the device, you press that. So if you're into searching games, which I never do, but if you search your games, if you want to look for games, you've got a huge library, that's where you set the hotkey. It does have an opportunity to enable retro achievements and log in here, but I've never found it to work. So I don't know why I've never had that working. That's why I just do it in Retroarch, as I explained earlier. Apps, you're able to say all apps, only games, all apps, only games. So this will give you just your emulators, or you can have all your apps. So if you just want it as a console, you can do that. Here you can also, on the widgets, you can add an app shortcut. So if there's a sort of Android app or an Android game that you are playing regularly, for instance, Dead Cells, I can add that there. And if you have a huge library, you can also do this random picker and it'll just pick a game for you. So this gives me an opportunity just to show you how to link everything up. So we're going to talk about your emulators and how to customize this whole system, like link the emulators and the games up. So the first thing you do is you go to the platform, go to paths, and you say add more. And now you want to find NES. So I need to find my NES games. There we go. I say use this folder and I say allow and I sync. Now, if you're connected to Wi-Fi, it's going to sync up the games, but then also look for artwork immediately. It should just sync it up. There we go. So it's already starting to look for the artwork and it's finding it also. There we go. Now, let's say, for example, it's not using the emulator that you want. Usually it just picks it up, Retroarch, Nestopia. That's not a problem. That's going to work fine. Let's just make sure that it does open the game. You can turn this off in the settings, but if you didn't shut a game down properly, it's just going to open up in that game. It's going to be irritating. So I'd rather have this annoying nag screen than open up in the wrong game sometimes. So anyway, just always say confirm. There we go. All right, so now we've synced up our games and the artwork is scraping and we've checked our emulator. Let's say, for example, it's chosen Lime 3DS, but we actually want to use that Mandarin. So there's Mandarin and we can choose Mandarin and it will use Mandarin. I actually do want to use Lime 3DS. Okay, so let's say, for instance, for this, I want to test this because they say that Mandarin has got better performance. So Sonic Generations, it's one of my favorite games and it always is very glitchy. So we're going to go here and we're going to choose custom player. So enable custom player. And then we go to Mandarin and we say save. Now, if we go here, yep, there we go. So it's loaded with Mandarin. And so now I can see maybe my Sonic Generations plays a bit better. What's cool is it picks up on the saves from the Lime 3DS. So I've got the same saves as Lime 3DS. So far, just as glitchy as Lime 3DS. So I'm not seeing any performance boost. Now quickly, just want to show you how to make it your home screen. So once you've got it all set up, there's not really any reason, like, you can access all of this via Daijisho. Just search for home, default home app. And yeah, we've got, you see, you can do the retro launcher. We're going to do Daijisho, set a home app, Daijisho, always. There we go. Now, when you switch it on and all that, I've got this lovely background theme that I've chosen. And I don't know, for me, Daijisho just works. It's all, everything's there. If you want something, even though some of the buttons are small, it's there. You've got like download platforms is right there. All the systems are listed here. You've got your settings, apps, all of that here. If you didn't set the shortcuts, there is a search button. It's tiny, but it is over there. So to answer my initial question, I don't really play a lot of Switch games on this device. While the chipset is quite powerful, I do still find a lot of crashes and bugs. You need to fiddle with the turnip drivers. And you know, it's a current system, so I don't really mess around a lot with Switch. Games like Dead Cells, like Android games, you know, there aren't a lot of controller-friendly Android games out there, but there's also the screen mapping that you can use. I mostly just play Dead Cells on here. I do find myself fiddling around mostly with CEMU. I quite enjoy messing around with that, but also, again, I do end up just playing a game that involves an Italian plumber. And then 3DS. 3DS looks absolutely stunning on here. One of my favorite systems to emulate, and just really great library of games. You should really try out the Street Fighter game. And also, many devices play PSP now, but PSP on here, man, just wow. Like, just wow.